It is my honor and privilege to introduce our village historian, Tuckahoe village historian, Nick Zanzano,
Thank
who
you,
I get to
Lainey.
work with every week on the Tuckahoe History Committee. And he does so much for the village. And I know you're going to enjoy this wonderful program, Tuckahoe Turn of the Century Photographs. Let's give him a hand.
Thank you, Lainey. Before I begin the program, I'd like to thank Lainey Provenzano, the Tuckahoe Library, for having me as a guest speaker. We're going to take a walk through Tuckahoe at the turn of the century, 1900, and we're going to be using vintage photos that have been compiled over the years by our past historians, Phil and Alice White, the Tuckahoe History Committee, Ernie Zaki, Liz Leckie. We're very fortunate. We also have photos from the Eastchester Historical Society, and that there's a lot of the work with Richard Forliano. So we've been very fortunate. We have a good selection of photos. The photos, I tried organizing them so it's easier for everyone to visualize where we are, because we're looking at buildings 120 years ago. So without further ado, we'll start the program. To see things, the first area we have to hit are historical maps. I want to be able to show you where we're walking, what we're looking at, and it'll give you a better lay of the land. This first map, it's a Julius Bean map of Tuckahoe, and it's dated 1893. I'm highlighting on the screen, you could see Breckenridge Street. Breckenridge Street was Columbus Avenue. We're going to be looking at photos around from Main Street to Underhill Street, from Lake Avenue to the Village Hall. So we're going to cover that area. We're going to do some of Hodgman Rubber, which takes place around the Malcolm Wilson Park. This is a great map. When you look at it, this is all Lakeville and Lake Avenue. And what's interesting, back in 1893, properties were put into the Parkway Oval from Bronx Road, and they went right down to the lake. That I thought was pretty interesting. Other points that are interesting on this map, if we look in the upper right-hand corner, all this area is Waverly. And at the turn of the century, Waverly was part of Tuckahoe. And then I think in the early 1900s, they moved the boundary down around Marbledale Road. What I found on this map was, here's the town hall. It was up here in Waverly, and it was also, let me highlight that. Here's the town hall. And appropriately, later on, they named the road Hall Street. And I thought that was a pretty interesting fact. Let's see. At this time, Hodgman Rubber was located on the Yonkers side of the Bronx River. Let me get the pointer. So Hodgman Rubber was just where the old cotton mill is, and it was just on that side of the river. In 1902 to 1922, they built the main factory buildings that eventually became Burroughs Welcome. And this is pretty much the lay of the land. Let me just highlight one more time. We're going to be talking, we're going to be showing around, let's see, can you see the, now I got to use the highlighter. We're just going to be working in this area and all along from Lake Avenue to Village Hall. Here's an aerial view. I just thought this would be an interesting photo to put in. And what's interesting with this photo, this photo is dated about 1928. And if you look where I'm highlighting right now on the right-hand side, this is Lake Avenue. And today, the parking lot is located at this location. But back then, there were boarding houses and the Lakeville Hotel there to accommodate all the workers at Hodgman Rubber and then Burroughs Welcome.
And you can see Growlers, the building is still standing.
Yeah.
That right there, that's the one thing that's
Well,
still
that's
standing right
the
there.
power building.
Yeah.
Okay, now we're really going to start the show. This is the intersection. This is Main Street. And now I'm highlighting Columbus Avenue or Breckenridge Street. And we're looking west. The building that we're looking at is the Depot Square Hotel. And they also said it was the Frank Fritz restaurant. And they had a beer garden in the back. This is located where the Tuckahoe Post Office is today. So things were a little different back then. What I'm highlighting right now is a horse and carriage. And I had people ask me at one presentation, gee, they had parking meters? Well, those were horse hitching posts. It's like a little piece out of the West. I thought the hitching posts were cool. Oh, let me just show you. What we're going to do is we're going to go north on Columbus Avenue. So we're going to get the next building to the right. These buildings, this is the Summer Bar. This was part of the Square Hotel. We had a harness shop. We don't have any more today, but wow, a harness shop. Then we have a contractor and decorator's office. The building that I'm looking at right now is the Leon Brewery and Pool Hall. And what was interesting, if you really zoom in and look at the flag in the front, they had silent moving pictures back then, and they were shown in the building. What's interesting with this building is right after this photo, the brewery closed up, and this became the Tuckahoe Hook and Ladder, part of the Tuckahoe Fire Department.
And where is that exactly located? Like today, if we were like thinking, where would that be?
This building would be in the parking lot of the post office.
Okay.
On the extreme right, we're going to get to this building in the next slide. This is Conlin Lumber.
That would be moved to Waddledale Road.
Now,
right?
Conlin Lumber was located on Columbus Avenue at this time because they needed the railroad. They had a railroad siding that would bring coal, wood, and cattle feed. Eastchester was mostly farms. Tuckahoe had horse and carriage. The fire department was right across the street. And you'll see in one of the later photos, the barn and a yard for horses right at the Depot Square. But again, Conlin Lumber. On the right is the freight yard. Right behind the building is the railroad. Now this slide is looking south. The building I'm highlighting right now is Conlin Lumber, the building we just looked at. You could see the railroad siding. The New York Railroad Harlem Division line would come down from New York City, would pass the yard, and then they would back the train up, and the train would drop off cars with coal, wood, and the cattle feed. Across the street in the upper left-hand corner, That's the Lyceum building. And we'll go into a lot more detail on that, but that was an important building in Tuckahoe at the time. The building we're looking at right now is at the corner of, this is Columbus Avenue, and here's Main Street. And if you look in the road, you could see the trolley tracks. And the trolley tracks it's coming from Yonkers and going up to Waverly Square.
But those trolley tracks were not removed, they were just removed recently.
They were covered over.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean,
Mhm.
not that long ago, right?
Right.
And that trolley went all the way up to the north end of Eastchester to White Plains.
Wow.
Well, the trolley, Waverly Square was the, how could I say it? The meeting place where all the trolleys would come. The trolley from Yonkers would go to Waverly. You can get off the trolley and get on another trolley and go to Mount Vernon, White Plains, or it would take you to Mill Road where you can go to New Rochelle. So you could really cover a lot of distance. And from what I understand, it was a nickel. And you get on the trolley, probably spend the whole day. Now, again, this building, this is the site of the Tuckahoe Plaza Mall today.
Yes.
And what's interesting too is the fence that I'm highlighting on Main Street and the fence I'm highlighting on Columbus Avenue, that was to keep the horses from getting loose on the road. The Tuckahoe Fire Department, the hose company, is located in the building on the extreme left. That was the barn. And the horses would stay in the backyard, perfume the air. But it's really, to me, it's just living in Tuckahoe, growing up in Tuckahoe. It's so incredible to look at these photos and say, wow, there were horses. It's like a piece of the Old West. The next photo, we're going to be going north on Columbus Avenue. We're going to go to the barn next. And again, this is still the Tuckahoe Plaza Mall. Here's the fence. Here's where the horses are. The barn for the horses at night. They keep the hay up above. And the next building on the left is the Tuckahoe Hose Company. In fact, the Tuckahoe Hose Company building, even this building was up until urban renewal. So the building was up really from the 1860s until the 1960s, up about 100 years. In the upper right background, there's Main Street School. Now, here we are. This is a view of the east side of Columbus Avenue. We're looking at the hose company, the barn, and the new fire truck. At this time, the fire department was all volunteers. Main Street at this time also was all cobblestone. I think that was real nice. You could hear the clunking on the road. Now here's a view looking north on Columbus Avenue. Across the street, that's Conlin Lumber's yard, the freight yard, and it went pretty far up Columbus Avenue. In the background, you'd be at the Parkway Oval.
There were houses on the Parkway Oval then, right?
Yeah. This next photo, this shows the Tuckahoe Hose Company building, and right next to it is a little Italian delicatessen or grocery store at the time. Now we're going to continue going north or to the left. They had an old broken down yard, but I thought this was pretty good. Again, this is still the east side of Columbus Avenue, and this is still the mall. The Lyceum building is on the extreme left. But this building was horseshoeing and general jobbing, taking care of horses, putting horseshoes on. Uh, really, just an awesome photo. Continuing north, here we are at the Lyceum building. And the Lyceum building later became the Tuckahoe Bowling Alley, but there's a lot to the Lyceum building. The Lyceum building downstairs, they had leather tanning, a sewing shop. Uh, the Lyceum School, before Main Street School was built, they had a school or classes in the Lyceum building. And it was for the more affluent families. But up on Jefferson Street, on off of Main, Jefferson had a school, and a lot of kids went there. I don't know if it was an official school, but there was a school on Jefferson, and that was in effect when the Lyceum School was in effect. And then when they opened Main Street School in 1906, everybody went there.
Was the Lyceum School a private school or a public school?
It was, I think it was really an unofficial school. They had teachers, but it wasn't an accredited school from my reading. So it's pretty interesting. The other thing with the Lyceum building is Shiloh Baptist Church used to have services in here until they got their own building.
Nick, what, the front of the building, the Lyceum, is that on, which way are we looking? Is
Okay,
that
if-
Underhill?
This is Underhill Street.
Oh,
In the front is Columbus Avenue. And what's an interesting fact, around 1910, they raised the Depot Square about 3 feet. When they raised the Depot Square, they had to raise Columbus Avenue and some of Main Street, so the roads would all blend together. And if you're an old timer from Tuckahoe, if you think back when we had the bowling alley, this building was a bowling alley, the Lyceum building. And I remember as a kid, you would walk, just jump up on the curb and walk directly into the building. If you look at the front entrance to the building, you had to go up about 3 or 4 stairs. And that was the distance that they had to raise the road.
So Nick, when you were a kid, that building was still there?
Yeah, that was the Tuckahoe Bowling Alley at the time. And down here in the back where the leather tanning was taking place, these were sewing shops. So I remember going to Main Street School, walking up Columbus, up Underhill, and you could look in the window and everybody had sewing machines and did their thing.
And
I
for
went to
Nick,
Main Street School as a kindergartner.
yeah,
Yeah.
and for those who don't know, the Main Street School is now
Village
the
Hall.
Village Hall.
It's the
So
Village
for
Hall
people who
today.
don't know,
That was Assumption School.
yes,
too.
yes.
And again, all the photos we just looked at were all dated circa 1907. Now, I think everybody knows Tuckahoe Station Cafe.
Yeah.
Okay, well, the building that the Tuckahoe Station Cafe is the Bentley building. And that building was built in 1920, I think it's 1927. But before that building was built, at the turn of the century, we had the Fisher building. The Fisher building had a grocery store on the first floor. Oh, this takes place. The road to the right is Main Street going down to Scarsdale Road, and in front is Lake Avenue. On the building on the left is Cornell's. The second floor, the top floors of this building was for the uh, Masonic temple. The Masonic Lodge had meetings there from 1886 to 1922. And then when they built the Masonic temple on Main Street, they moved to the new building, and then this building got removed, torn down, and they built the Bentley building where the Tuckahoe Station Cafe is located.
Now, the Fisher building, is that the Fisher that's related to Arlene Gruber?
I don't know. I wish Arlene was here.
She is. She's on here right now. Arlene, do you want to unmute? Or is that the Fisher building that you're related to?
I don't really think so. I don't know. I really,
Okay, further research for that.
Yeah, the assistant superintendent of highways had a house right across from Town Hall in Eastchester, and that's still standing.
Mhm.
But Fisher was a very important figure in the Tuckahoe community.
Yeah, I didn't find
And
any.
that is, just for those of you at home, that is the Eastchester Town historian, Richard Forliano, commenting. So just so I can identify people.
We got to use the artificial intelligence.
Yeah.
I'm serious.
We'll get into that. Okay, the next group of photos that I'm going to start showing take place at the Tuckahoe. Let's see. Here we go. This is the Main Street Depot, and the photo that I'm highlighting right now is in the parking lot of the Main Street Depot. So here's Lake Avenue on the left. Main Street is right in front of us. You can see the trolley tracks. And we're at the intersection, and we have a ladies' dress shop, a general store. And
This is
again,
the Growlers parking lot, just so
Yeah.
people
Yeah.
don't, if they don't know what the Main
Okay,
Street Depot is, yeah.
I was just talking with a friend, and later on, this became the Maplewood Bar
Right.
in the future. But under the building, the foundations were all wood. They had concrete foundations around the perimeter, but the whole bottom was very small timbers. I thought that was fascinating. But you could see how old the buildings look. This is 1907. You know they've been up for a while. They had to be around, built around the time we had the Civil War going. So it really brings things into context of how old the buildings are.
Nick, when did the Hodgman Rubber come to the Tuckahoe side? What year? You told me that before.
Hodgman Rubber, they built the Riverview, the building that
Yeah.
the Riverview is in. That was in 1903 or 1904. They built the first large concrete building. Then they built an addition to it in about 1912. And then they built the final portion along Lake Avenue, and that was completed in 1922, right before they left Tuckahoe.
It was a major employer in town during World War I.
Yeah, I think at one point they had like 600 or 700 people working there.
Close to
So-
1,400.
Wow.
More than the quarry. People don't realize that.
This photo is just to the left. Let's see. We have the general store, and if we go to the right, here's the general store. We have a barber shop, a hand laundry. Tuckahoe had it had everything. It was self-contained. This building is just to the right of the hand laundry. From my research, this was used as a boarding house. We had a restaurant, a meat market, and we had a real estate office to the right. And here's that real estate office. The railroad is just to the right of the trees. And in the background is Charlie Hodgman's mansion. The Hodgmans, not only did they have the rubber factory, Charlie Hodgman was the financial manager of Hodgman Rubber. Jonathan Hodgman, who founded Hodgman Rubber, lived in Malcolm Wilson Park. And if you look at Malcolm Wilson Park, you'll see a stone wall, a curved stone wall. That was the stone wall that his house was at. So it's pretty interesting.
Those mansions were both in Yonkers?
Yeah. No, Charlie Hodgman's, the one we're looking at now, was in Tuckahoe.
Okay.
But Jonathan Hodgman, his was in Malcolm Wilson Park, which was Yonkers. I threw this photo in just to bring things into context. Where I'm highlighting right now is Lake Avenue. If I make the right-hand turn, I'm on Main Street. And you can see how Main Street severely dipped at the railroad tracks. And this is where it would flood. This is before they built the bridge. Here's the boarding house on the left. And this is where Growlers is now. So this whole area was Growlers and the parking lot. On the background, this was the Dusenberry building. This was where all the offices for the town of Eastchester and the village of Tuckahoe were kept. This is before the Polk building, our original village hall, was put in. This little thing that looks like a train, this was they called it a bean wagon. And pretty much it was a mobile luncheonette to, I think, help accommodate all the workers at Hodgman Rubber at the time. Now we're going to go east of the railroad. The railroad is over here on the left. You could see the gatehouse. So when a train was going to go from New York City north, say towards White Plains, the gate would come down, the gate arm, and that would stop the traffic, the horse and carriage, and the trolleys. The building we're looking at was the Rubley building. And William Rubley was one of the first mayors of Tuckahoe. And he was also the inventor of the toggle bolt. Now this building, the buildings we're looking at right now in this series, this is from the railroad to Columbus Avenue. So we're working our way towards the today's post office. The train was street level. The train was street level until 1910, 1911. That's when they made the change. And it was like a total renaissance going on here in Tuckahoe. They raised the depot square. They lowered the railroad tracks. They built the bridge. Then a lot of these buildings were taken down. New buildings were put up. We had the Square Hotel. We had a lot of different buildings. A lot went on at this time.
Who paid for all that?
That's a good question.
You know, I could picture Hodgman Rubber donating a lot of finance, and also the quarry system. The quarry system needed the railroad because before that they had oxen and carriages to carry huge pieces of marble to go on ships. With the railroad, I read that the marble industry talked with the railroad to extend the railroad beyond Tuckahoe to Circuit, so the train spur would go to Marbledale Road to pick up the marble and bring it to New York to ship wherever they had to ship it. So it's pretty interesting. And if you recall, when I showed you Conlin Lumber on Columbus Avenue, well, Conlin got all their supplies by the railroad. When the railroad got lowered, Conlin moved to Marbledale Road. But also the railroad went up the railroad spur on, what's the street? Circuit, and went to Marbledale Road. So I'm sure the railroad went down and dropped off supplies with the marble industry.
That's a great question. Maybe artificial intelligence could say.
That, it knows more than we do, Rich.
I have no idea who paid for it, but
Well, it's something to
somebody had to pay
research,
for
yeah.
it.
Now, here we are. We're going from the Rubley building. We're working our way towards Columbus Avenue, where we have the building with the peak. This is the Square Hotel, the Depot Square Hotel. And this is where Columbus Avenue is. If you look, you'd have to come up, go south on Columbus Avenue, then you'd have to turn and then turn again to go into the Depot Square. Because we had the Duesenberry building, it took up half of the Depot Square. So it was the Duesenberry building was very important. But in 1927, they ripped down the Duesenberry building. They widened Depot Square to the size it is today, so Columbus Avenue could flow directly to Sagamore Road and go to Bronxville. So there was a lot of change going on. Now here we are back to the intersection. This is Main Street and Columbus Avenue. Again, this is the Kramer building. Here's the fence for the horses. And again, this is the Tuckahoe Plaza Mall.
It's where Food Chow is today, right?
If we go to the right of this, we're going east. Here's another real estate office. I don't know if this is an apartment building, and you can't make out what type of store it is, but all of this was all part of the Plaza Mall today.
Now, Nick, do these pictures come from Ernie Zaki?
These photos are probably a combination of the Westchester Historical Society, Eastchester Historical Society, and Tuckahoe, because I found negatives in the Tuckahoe Historical. I've been to the Westchester Historical Society doing research, and I found negatives there. They belong to all of us.
Composite, okay.
This next photo, it's just going a little further east. And if you look to the extreme right, here's Main Street School. So this is the Main Street School lot and the fencing in front of it. Now I'm going to go over, we're going to take a look at Hodgman Rubber. Here's the old mill building. And this is in the late 1800s. Here's the horse and carriages and all the auxiliary buildings associated with Hodgman Rubber. Hodgman started on the side of the Bronx River where the mill building was. They bought the mill building and then they expanded from there.
The trolley didn't go down Columbus Avenue. Is that correct?
No, the trolley didn't. Here's the mill building again with the auxiliary buildings. Now, the bridge that we go over to go to Malcolm Wilson Park, you could see it was just an old dilapidated bridge over the river. But look how wide the river was. It looks like it was almost a lake at one point. This bridge is very old. It was called Bompo's Bridge, and it was shown on a 1798 map of Tuckahoe.
The river was much wider because the Kensico Reservoir had not been built yet. So the floodplain was the river was much wider, so you could send goods down to New York City. And once they built the dam, It's still flooded,
No.
but it wasn't.
I didn't know that. That's really interesting. Yeah, so this was called Bompo's Bridge. And over here, I'm going to an old map. They spelled Eastchester as two separate words, and the map was 1798. And what I thought was great, I'm gonna highlight this area, but here's Bompo's Bridge. And now that it's highlighted, it says Bompo's Bridge, and the road is actually Main Street. And where does it go? It goes up to Route 22. Let me highlight that for everyone. This is 22, or the Post Road. Here's Bompo's Bridge. And where did it go? It went to a very important building in Tuckahoe, the Ward House. And I thought that was very interesting. I had to put this map.
Yeah, so they used that bridge during the Revolution. It was called the Tuckahoe Road.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Winter Hill
going to
Road
the
was,
Ward House.
was
Yeah.
called the Winter Hill Road. Winter Hill Road was Tuckahoe Road.
Right.
Washington, in a number of letters, talked about, he never stepped foot in present day Eastchester, but he referred to the Ward House and its strategic importance.
Mm-hmm. The 22 going to the Ward House, right after this map, before Tuckahoe had a post office, the first post office was really the Ward House up on 22. And the stagecoach would come from New York with the mail. They'd bring it to the Ward House when it was used as a post office. And that's where the people got their mail.
Is that across 22?
Hmm?
Is that across the street?
Yeah, yeah. So a very, very, very interesting map.
President Martin Van Buren stayed overnight at the Ward Tavern, which was called Marble Hall at the time in
Yeah.
1839. He's the only president to sleep overnight in the present town of Eastchester, which was which became which was in 1902. It became Tuckahoe, the village of Tuckahoe.
Right. That's when we were incorporated. This photo is taken from the roof of one of the Hodgman buildings, or possibly from the cotton mill, and it's looking at Bompo's Bridge. And here's the bridge. This would be Scarsdale Road, and you're going into Tuckahoe. Here's the Fisher House. Here's Yonkers Avenue. It's I think just a beautiful picture. This is dating back into the mid to early 1800s. Here's another great photo. This shows the old mill building, the auxiliary buildings for the marble industry. Here's Bompo's Bridge and Scarsdale Road. Malcolm Wilson Park is right behind the trees. And here's Yonkers Avenue. So you can see the main factory buildings on the Tuckahoe side of the river, or the east side of the river, weren't built at this point. Now we're looking at the same thing, the same picture. The mill building is on the extreme left. This is the Tuckahoe side. This is the first portion of Hodgman rubber that was built. Right after this section was built, I think in 1914, they built a section over here in the back. And then right after that, they ripped this house down and they built the final portion of Hodgman rubber. Here's one of the Hodgman rubber trucks. And I guess the drivers were considered skilled workers at the time. I thought it was pretty wild that they all had ties on, ties and vests. So that was the beginning of motor vehicles. So when we go to Lake Avenue goes across on the sheet. And this is the gate into Charlie Hodgman's house. This is where Growlers is. The powerhouse wasn't built at the time. You had Charlie Hodgman here. And again, this is on Lake Avenue. Lake Avenue is right here. This is another view of Charlie Hodgman's house. Pretty wild. Porte-a-share on Lake Avenue. I thought that was really awesome. The next photo is roughly it's exactly where the Fisher Building was. The Fisher Building was located right here in the center of this photo. In this picture, this was the Duesenberry General Store. Now you really have to visualize this. Here's in the upper right-hand corner is the cotton mill. The area where the fence is where Charlie Hodgman's property is. Lake Avenue goes to the right. This is Main Street. And here's the railroad at the grade level. The photo, again, this photo is about 1850, 1860. The house on the left-hand side, this was a Duesenberry house. And if you look at some of the old maps, you can't drive south on Lake Avenue. So what they did was they picked this house up, they moved it to where the Parkway Casino is. And when they moved this house out of the way, they extended Lake Avenue south to Armavilla. So that's a pretty interesting thing. But this is one of our older photos, again from roughly the 1850s. Here's the building of the bridge. They were lowering the tracks. If you see this wall that I'm highlighting right now, the wall was built so they could raise the depot square. Temporarily, they had to keep traffic going, so they built a temporary bridge over the railroad. In the upper right-hand corner, you could see all the buildings down in Lake Avenue. These were boarding houses, and there was also a parsonage for the Methodist Church, because the Hodgmans were Methodist, and I guess they took care of the church. So they had that built on Lake Avenue.
How was the excavation done? Do you know?
Hmm?
How was the excavation done?
They did have steam shovels,
Oh.
but it was real steam. It wasn't gas powered. Probably.
They trucked in all that dirt.
I have no idea. Maybe they used that to raise the depot square. Take the dirt and put it up above. Now, just to see how much the dip is, if you look at this photo, this is taken from on top of the temporary bridge, looking up Main Street. On the right-hand side is the Duesenberry building. There was a pharmacy in there. Here's the building with the peak roof, and that was the Depot Square Hotel. On the extreme left is the Rubely building. So not much traffic. You could see horse and carriage primarily. This next photo is a map that I thought was interesting. I think everybody would find it interesting. The building with the peak I'm highlighting right now, the Depot Square Hotel. Here's Columbus Avenue. And what you had to do, if you drove south on Columbus Avenue, you couldn't go right up Sagamore Road, which was called Duesenberry Avenue at the time. You had to make a right-hand turn. The Duesenberry building was located at this spot in the middle of Depot Square. So back at this time, before 1927, you had to make a right-hand turn onto Main Street, then go into the Depot Square, which was just this little area.
How
And-
old is the Pope building now? I mean, you know, when was that built?
The Pope building, or the original Depot Village Hall, was built in 1913. Now, this building, this photo shows the raising of Depot Square, and they're also raising the train station. The train station was built in 1901, and it's like 9 years later, and they're raising the Depot Square, and they had to raise the train station at the time. You could see the boarding house on Main Street in the background and the temporary bridge going over the railroad. In 1910, 1911, the bridge was finally completed. This is the raised Depot Square. You can see the trolley going across. And I think there's another trolley in the background right in front of the boarding house. A lot of change went on at this point. The buildings, this was the Rubley building. The Rubley building got torn down. They built walls and they built all new structures. And you could see them over here. The Rubley building was located at this point. And now you have the Square Hotel. And the Square Hotel, I have some more pictures of that, but you could see the bridge,
That's a great shot.
everything. You could see the trolley tracks going up Main Street, but you have to visualize the Depot Square was raised, everything meets. They had to raise a portion of Main Street to meet with the Depot Square. So it's a lot of planning, and I think it's a great job. They also remodeled the Duesenberry building. Again, that held all the offices for the village and the town. Now, when you look at the buildings that they built on the east side of the railroad, you had the Square Hotel and the Leader Department Store. Now, this photo's roughly 1912 to 1915, and they built the Square Hotel. The railroad is lowered on the left-hand side. All right, they're just going through a lot of change in this photo, but the Leader Department Store was an important store. So you had the Leader Department Store at this time. You also had Cornell's Hardware. If you look right here where I'm highlighting, this was a newspaper store. And here's a gentleman and his wife. And these were the proprietors of the store. And I had to put this photo because the dress that they had was the dress at a time. Here's a great view of the Depot Square. This is the smaller Depot Square. Here's the Duesenberry building. Here's the Square Hotel, the Lita department store. Again, the railroad is on the left. On the right, to the right of the Duesenberry building that I'm highlighting, we had the Tuckahoe Municipal Building. Again, I think we have sheds in the back of our house that are bigger, but this housed the police department, and it also housed an office to manage the police and the town affairs. This photo is about roughly 1900. This is just before they ripped down the building. When they ripped down the municipal building, this is roughly in the same location that the Pope building or the original Village Hall was located. And let's see, let me get a few more photos. Okay, we're going to do some photos of the Tuckahoe Railroad Station. I think you'll find this interesting. This photo is about 1850. I should say 1844. This is when the railroad first came to Tuckahoe. You can see the railroad tracks at the bottom of the photo. We have 3 riders for the train, and this is the train station. No Starbucks. In the background, you have the Pugmire Hotel, and that was really one of the first hotels in the area. This was in the Depot Square, and it's where the Duesenberry building was. In the early 1850s, they needed a little nicer train station. So this is the Tuckahoe train station, and this station stayed until about 1900, and then they built the brick station. But again, all at grade level. In the back, just adjacent to it, to the left, we have a hardware store. And the hardware store is located where Oak Street is. If anybody's familiar, right alongside the railroad station, you have Oak Street. Well, this is where Oak Street is going to be eventually. And the municipal building is right here.
Oh, so Oak Street wasn't a street. This was in the middle of
Right,
where Oak
right.
Street is. Oh.
So looking at old maps, you could see Oak Street stopped and went up to Sagamore Road. But when they ripped down the hardware store and they ripped down the municipal building, they built the new Pope building, quote, Village Hall, and they made Oak Street go through. This is another nice vintage picture. Here we have Oak Street going through. Here's the brick building. This building was the first Union-free church, and pretty wild. This is where the railroad, the train is going to be. Here's the Gatehouse Arms. This is Main Street, Depot Square, and at this time, Sagamore Road was Duesenberry Avenue. It was Duesenberry Avenue until it got to the Bronxville border. At the Bronxville border, it was Sagamore Road. So when they ripped the Duesenberry building down in Depot Square, they got rid of the name and they kept Sagamore Road into Bronxville. And this will be almost one of the last photos for tonight, but here's the railroad at the grade level. I thought this was interesting. This is a horse trough.
Yeah.
And this box that's on the curb of the Duesenberry building, when the horse and carriage would come, people could step off, go onto the step and come down.
You think that was a piece of marble?
Hmm?
Is that a piece of marble? do you think?
I've seen them on some photos where there were literally boxes. And, but we do have it in Village Hall. We have a marble step, and it's Tuckahoe marble.
Remember we had one on Bella Vista that said Fisher. I think the Fisher family lived.
Here's just another photo circa 1900. Horse and carriage, the train at grade level, the Union Free Church, and the train station. And I got another minute, so let's take a look. In 1910, this was the first electric train to come into Tuckahoe. Before that, they were coal heated steam engines. And this is the first electric train to go into Tuckahoe. And it's ironic, right now it's 1910, the first train comes, and now we're going to start to lower the tracks. But this was a big occasion, electric at the time. And look at the crowd.
No, wow.
And what I love is how patriotic, with everybody with the flags. This is like when we landed on the moon.
Yeah.
And that really concludes tonight's show.